This is legislation that's going to protect all Australians.
Is that true? Because Australians have been getting doxxed for a long time, and it doesn't seem to have bothered Mark Dreyfus until it happened to one of his mates.
Activists campaigning for a ceasefire in Gaza, like Dr. Shulan Moore, have had their employment threatened after their personal information has been shared.
Bueller.
I've had terrible vitriol on my social media posts, calling me terrible names.
It certainly didn't bother him when members of One Nation had their personal details doxxed by a newspaper on whose board Mr. Dreyfus sat, as revealed in excellent reporting by Bernard Keane and Crikey, as well as Wendy Bacon and Farah Abdurrahman of Michael West Media.
Ain't it hypocritical?
Whatever you think of the political views of women like Shulan Moore, or people who join One Nation for that matter, it's not clear to us why their rights are less important than the rights of Ms. Kushnir or Ms. Latouf.
The personal toll of doxing is waking up, seeing something, feeling your stomach full, feeling anxious and worried about your personal reputation, your professional reputation, your livelihood.
In fact, for most of the past 2 years, all we heard from elite Australians of both parties is that there was too much privacy,
people masking themselves,
and too much anonymity in Australia.
all of that should be legislated out of existence.
Not too little.
You're covering your face because you're a gutless coward. I think it's time to expose those individuals.
It seems that if someone making minimum wage wants to wear a mask at a protest because, I don't know, they fear secret reprisals from people like the world's most moral KC.
We're not getting pushed around anymore. We're now seeing consequences levied against those who take action and stand against our people.
That's unacceptable to our political leadership, including the leaders of what is still called the Labour Party, even though there's not a single case of a Palestinian rights protester harming a Jewish person. But when the world's most moral KC wants to avoid the anger of having been caught leading a secret and potentially illegal blacklisting campaign against an ordinary Australian, suddenly the right to anonymity is a national priority.
In a way that's just insulting.
Yes. Let that sink in, my fellow Australians. Multiple things can be true. We can condemn doxing, while also condemning the incredibly selective sensitivity about whose privacy matters and whose doesn't in Australia, whose safety matters and whose doesn't.
Those who seek to embolden bad behaviour, who seek to be anonymous, to threaten and intimidate Victorians, will be held to account.
Well, not everyone who threatens and intimidates Victorians, as we've seen, and as we shall soon see.
You're covering your face because you're a gutless coward. I think it's time to expose those individuals.
Privacy and safety for me, accountability and consequence for thee.
I'm so fed up of the double standards and all of this.
I didn't realize we had any plans.
You say something that they don't like, and they decide to go to your bosses and call for you to be fired.
It's the same plan that we used last time, and the 17 times before that.
And whose dignity matters and whose doesn't.
This is legislation that's going to protect all Australians. We want to protect everybody.
There's one person in Australia who is truly entitled to complain about unfair vilification and abuse. A young woman who knows what it's like to have her dignity and safety treated with utter disregard. That woman is the New York Times journalist Natasha Frost. Remember I told you that Alana Kushnir was a member of two chat groups, Lawyers for Israel and another group called Jewish Creatives and Academics. Well, that latter group was a group to which journalist Natasha Frost also belonged.
It's just really upsetting when people assume that by Jewish people talking to each other privately, what they assume is privately, that it's somehow secretly, and even more than that, that it's somehow a conspiracy. Somehow that's become an acceptable narrative. It's very saddening.
I'm shocked that people would think of labelling us in some negative way because we're just hanging out, talking, or trying to support each other as Jewish creatives and academics.
I don't think we should be vilified for being in a space where we offer emotional and psychological support to each other, the same way that any other group is entitled to do.
Of course, everyone deserves a space for conversation and emotional support. But this being News Corp, You won't be surprised if we told you that what the Australian leaves out of the story is just as important, if not more important, than what they put in. Because some of that emotional support included exchanges like this one, posted to the group on Tuesday, the 14th of November, 2023, by a woman we'll just call T. One of my big goals is taking down Clementine, meaning Clementine Ford, either by making her issue a public apology or getting her dropped by her publisher, or preferably both. I will start a subgroup specifically for this purpose as a task for action. The next day, in another message, T says, I'd love to coordinate some kind of collective effort, maybe combining with a lawyer group to get a cease and desist legal letter with all our signatures to their publishers. Whatever we think of Jewish creatives and academics, I think any reasonable person would agree that this is a bit more than
talking to each other privately,
hanging out, talking, trying to support each other.
For emotional and psychological support to each other. The same way that any other group is entitled to do.
Of course, they're entitled to talk to each other about whatever they like. They're also entitled to advocate for the sacking of fellow Australians. It's a free country. And they aren't lawyers or people who hold public license, so they aren't subject to conduct regulations or expectations of the types we just discussed.
We're not getting pushed around anymore.
Yes, we get it, Mr. Rip. You've said that so many times. And as we've said many times, that's your right to advocate for it.
If someone gets up and says something terrible about Israel, terrible,
we're now seeing
very big stick
consequences levied.
We know. Believe me, we know. The thing is, and we mean no disrespect to Jewish creatives and academics in saying this, but lawyers and KCs have much bigger sticks than they do, and much bigger shields.
The judge suppressed for 10 years the names and addresses of a group called Lawyers for Israel.
Men like the world's most moral KC can swing it
very big stick
at fellow Australians with much more impunity and institutional support than they can. We are very sorry to inform you. But our unfortunate Jewish creatives and academics didn't know that in November of 2023. Shortly after Lawyers for Israel ran their campaign against Ms. Lattouf, Creatives Australia were targeting Australian critics of Israel like Matt Chung, Nadine Shamali, the very funny and talented Lauren Dubois, and Clementine Ford. So Ms. Frost, who is Jewish, blew the whistle. She shared the contents of chats with another journalist whose identity to our knowledge has never been revealed, and somehow that information got into the hands of another group, this time of strident anti-Zionist activists who were also, to our knowledge, Jewish, who combed through the chats and, where possible, matched the names in the chat thread to real people, identifying them in a spreadsheet which they posted online. Now, you may have read that Ms. Frost was accused of leaking private information. Think about that for a moment. In what universe are statements made to a chat group of 600 people, a chat group that includes journalists, without any explicit rules like Chatham House rules governing what is or isn't on or off the record? In what universe are such statements not eligible for public reporting and scrutiny? As for the activists who posted names online, our understanding is that this was done to enable those who read the chats to match names in the thread to real people. And to our understanding, no non-public information was shared by anyone. They reported what was said and identified those who said it. Now, we accept that the vast majority of texts in that chat group were innocuous. So in a better world, the identities of participants who had nothing to do with any conspiracy against fellow Australians would have been kept entirely out of the story. We also accept that had Ms. Frost been more careful and more selective about what she shared, and or had the journalist with whom she shared those texts done the same, then much needless harassment and trauma for innocent people would have been avoided. Fine. That's a legitimate critique. But let's get serious for a moment. I can personally testify that private information is mishandled every single day in Australia, sometimes with catastrophic consequences.
There are warnings tonight that lives will be destroyed.
The hackers releasing details of personal information.
Of 5.7 million travellers.
More than 130,000 Australian Telstra customers have had their personal information made public.
Qantas failed to take reasonable action, has been very tight-lipped.
I am taking this seriously and will continue to take this seriously.
The same forum as the Optus customer data last week.
The Medibank CEO today said, "We unreservedly apologise to our customers."
None of these executives was ever subjected to the kind of malevolent, mendacious, and frankly dangerous vilification and abuse that Ms. Frost experienced. None. Despite the fact that these are all leaders of world-class organizations that collectively spend probably hundreds of millions of dollars every year on compliance, data security, mandatory training, testing, systems, the works. I've got no idea what kind of mandatory training in data protection and privacy Ms. Frost has received over the course of her career as a New York Times journalist, but I'm fairly certain it would be nothing compared to what anyone who works at a world-class telco or health insurer would undergo every single year. Unlike the world's most moral KC, however, Ms. Frost, 32 years old, was courageous enough and dignified enough to acknowledge her mistakes, explain her intentions, and apologize for their unintended consequences. And unlike Lawyers for Israel, the harm that was done was not intentional. She did not seek to hide behind other people or the shield of court-imposed anonymity. Yet a political and legal system which seemed so concerned about the safety of the world's most moral KC does not appear to have even been aware of what happened to Ms. Frost. So we thought we'd tell you. Google the name Natasha Frost. You'll be amazed at what you find. There are entire Reddit threads dedicated to articulating vicious hatred towards her. You can find personal information about her, terrifying calls for retribution, including glib talk of assassination from Jewish people all over the world.
Doxxing is commonly understood to mean the malicious publication of personal or private details without the consent of the person concerned.
And remember, Natasha Frost is herself Jewish. So why is rage directed against her so much more febrile than that directed against these multi-million-dollar CEOs? It's because most accounts of Ms. Frost's story paint her as a Jew hater who assembled lists of Jews for persecution, as if they were crypto-Jews hiding from the Inquisition. There's no mention of the behavior Ms. Frost believed should be a matter of public interest. No reason for someone outside of Australia to know that she was actually engaged in whistleblowing. There's no mention of her Jewish identity, or the Jewish identity of the activists who were actually responsible for assembling and publicizing the texts and names. Read a typical story about Natasha Frost, either in Australia or around the world, and the image you get is of some modern Irma Greza hunting Jews.
Monsieur Lapetit, are you aware of the nickname the people of France have given me?
That they call you the Jew hunter?
Precisely. Because I'm aware what tremendous feats human beings are capable of once they abandon dignity.
Targeting of people because they happen to be Jewish is just completely unacceptable.
That, my friends, is slander. And it's the worst kind of slander. It's not politicians slinging insults at each other. It's punching down slander. Slander against people who can't clap back and who can't defend themselves. Whether it was intentional or simply convenient lack of curiosity, our Prime Minister lent the gravitas of his office to validate accusations by people of the caliber of Alex Rivchin, Jeremy Liebler, Sky News, and many others to accuse Natasha Frost of being comparable to a Nazi who targets and hunts Jews.
Having lists of Jews brings up very vivid pictures.
That's got shocking historical echoes
Of what happened during the Holocaust, and that is that the Nazis made lists of Jews so that they could go and find them and then round them up, and we all know what happened.
Singling out Jewish businesses, singling out people, that's something strikes an echo for every single member of the Jewish community in Australia.
I don't know how a sitting Attorney General could say something so historically illiterate, so disrespectful to the memory of victims of genocide, and do so in service of a slander against a vulnerable young Jewish woman, young enough to be Mr. Dreyfus's daughter. With all due respect to everyone involved in this story, if we in Australia really have trouble understanding the difference between a list of people targeted for genocide because they are Jewish and a list of lawyers who conspired to punish someone for reporting on a genocide, if the difference between those two things is unfathomable simply because they both involve Jews, then we need to fundamentally rethink historical education in this country.
It's been pretty stressful. I've had hate mail, I've had social media abuse, accusing me of being, a genocidal right-wing extremist, which is probably the exact opposite of where I stand.
As a result of being placed on that list and doxxed, I've received a lot of vicious online harassment.
I felt quite isolated.
There's been assumption that somehow by being Jewish that I need to make a statement.
Last we left it, you did refuse to condemn.
Unreservedly condemn.
Do you condemn 9/11?
Will you now take the opportunity to condemn?
That's such a ridiculous. It's a yes or no.
Or that I'm expected to, or a kind of collective guilt.
Well, can they really be excused for blame for what they've bring on themselves? Or am I being unfair?
No, I don't think they can be.
There is a certain degree of complicity with many. Now, does that mean that they deserve to die, as she stated? No, of course not. But it's not the same thing as being innocent either.
I've reached out to certain friends to talk as well, and I've had very difficult conversations. I just asked them if they could say on social media they stand against antisemitism, but they won't do it. It seems to be fraught for them to put that out there, which is sad for me.
As people who have asked friends to take a stand against ethnic cleansing and the starvation of children, we know exactly how Ms. Gertler Gold must feel.
They won't do it. It seems to be fraught for them to put that out there, which is sad for me.
So we stand in solidarity with her against anti-Semitism and against all forms of racism, even though doing so means we face
consequences levied,
very big stick,
wielded to such impressive effect on the life of Natasha Frost and on many, many people in Australia and around the world.
Everything possible is done to make an example of this bad nigger so there won't be any more like him.
It started with being likened to a Nazi, which is a awful inversion of reality. And since then I've received swastikas, I've been called a cancer.
Reasonable people can disagree on the actions of Ms. Talia and Selim, or the actions of Ms. Ford, Ms. Latouf, and many others. But no reasonable Australian can disagree that Ms. Frost has the same right to basic safety as anybody else, even if she isn't important to somebody powerful. Just like Zulin Moore, just like Antoinette Latouf, Sarah Schwartz, and millions of other Australians whom our political class doesn't seem to see.
I want to hold your hand when I say this. Democrats do not care.
She's talking about the US, of course. But many Australians suspect that the hypocrisy we've described in this video suggests that she could be talking about Labour in Australia as well, or Labour in Britain, and for the exact same reasons.
There is no relationship between what people want and what the Democratic Party is willing to advance. And there are no consequences for their lack of Democratic representation, because there's always the Republican Party and they're always worse.
Sound familiar? This is why we say to our fellow Australians, ordinary Australians, Jewish Australians, Gentile Australians, white Australians, non-white Australians, our elites are not going to save us. Because when they talk about social cohesion, those words don't mean the same as what they mean for you and me.
It's time to bring peace, not division, to our street.
We do not need to be having our social fabric torn apart by hate.
They also don't want conflict brought here.
They're talking about cohesion in the party room, cohesion in the boardroom, cohesion at the political fundraising cocktail, cohesion in the chairman's lounge. When they talk about safety, they mean safety for men like the world's most moral KC and their friends. They don't mean safety for you and for me.
The only Jewish safety that's important is Zionist Jewish safety.
They don't give a shit.
That's the kind of safety and cohesion we're going to have to secure ourselves. Because while all this was happening, the back scratching, the favor swapping, the glazing, the breathtaking smallness of it all.
They have decided that they will keep their first-class cabins on the ship.
as a sex.
That's got shocking historical echoes.